I found my partner's body 3 feet from our campfire. Her throat opened so wide I could see the white of her spine through the torn flesh. My name is Alexander Chen. I'm 28 years old, a wildlife photographer from Minneapolis. I'm telling you this story because the police won't listen, the media thinks I'm insane, and something needs to be said before more people die on the shores of Lake Superior. What happened to me and Sarah in the woods outside Duluth wasn't a bear attack, despite what the official reports claim. I know what I saw, I know what killed her, and I know it's still out there. Sarah and I had been together for 3 years. She was a botanist, passionate about documenting rare plant species in the northern Minnesota wilderness. That October, she'd received a grant to study a particular type of frost-resistant lichen that only grew in the rocky areas near the lake. I tagged along with my cameras, thinking it would be a peaceful weekend of work and camping. We'd done it dozens of times before. We arrived at our campsite on a Friday afternoon, just as the sun was beginning its early autumn descent. The location was remote, about 8 miles from the nearest hiking trail, accessible only by a barely maintained forestry road. Sarah had chosen it specifically because of its isolation. The lichen she was studying thrived away from human disturbance. The first night passed without incident. We cooked dinner over the fire, talked about her research, and I showed her some shots I'd gotten of a red fox earlier in the day. The temperature dropped to near freezing after sunset, but our tent was warm and we fell asleep to the sound of waves lapping against the rocky shore about 100 yards from our site. Saturday was overcast with a cold wind blowing off the lake. Sarah spent most of the day on the rocks near the water, carefully documenting her specimens. I wandered the woods with my telephoto lens, hoping to catch some shots of the migrating birds that passed through this area. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a bruised purple-gray, and the wind carried the smell of coming snow. That evening, as we prepared dinner, Sarah mentioned that she'd seen something strange. Large tracks in the mud near the water's edge. Canine in shape, but far too big to be from any dog. She'd assumed they were wolf prints, though she said they seemed oddly distorted, as if the creature had been walking partially upright at times. I remember laughing, telling her she'd been reading too many cryptid blogs. The temperature plummeted after dark. We fed the fire and stayed close to it, wrapped in blankets. Around 9 o'clock, we heard the first howl. It came from somewhere deep in the forest, a sound that started low and rose to a pitch that made my teeth ache. It wasn't like any wolf howl I'd ever heard, and I'd recorded wolves in northern Canada. This was longer, more modulated, almost as if something was trying to form words within the sound. Sarah's face had gone pale. "That's not a wolf," she whispered. More howls answered the first, coming from different directions surrounding us. They went on for nearly 20 minutes, echoing through the trees and bouncing off the lake's surface. Then abruptly they stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. We sat by the fire, neither of us speaking. Every snap of a branch, every rustle in the undergrowth made us jump. I kept my largest camping knife within reach, though what good I thought it would do against a pack of wolves, I don't know. Around midnight, exhaustion won over fear. We retreated to our tent, zipping it carefully shut. I lay awake for a long time, listening. Sarah's breathing eventually deepened into sleep, but I remained alert, my hand on the knife. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke suddenly to the sound of something moving around our campsite. Heavy footfalls, deliberate and slow. I held my breath listening. Whatever it was walked on 2 legs. I could hear the distinct pattern of bipedal movement, the rhythm of step after step. It circled the tent once, twice. Then it stopped directly outside the entrance. I heard breathing, deep, wet, rattling breaths that didn't sound remotely human. Something sniffed at the tent fabric, and I watched in horror as the material sucked inward slightly from the force of its inhalation. My hand tightened on the knife handle until my knuckles ached. Then, after what felt like an eternity, it moved away. I heard it walk toward the fire pit, heard the sound of our food bag being torn open, and the crunch of something eating. After several minutes, the footsteps receded into the forest. I didn't sleep again that night. When dawn finally came, gray and cold, I unzipped the tent and looked out. Our campsite was destroyed. The food bag had been shredded, supplies scattered everywhere. But what made my blood run cold were the tracks. They were massive, easily twice the size of my hand. They had the general shape of canine prints, with claw marks extending well beyond the toe pads. But there was something wrong about their proportion. The heel was too elongated, the toes spread too wide, and in some places they transitioned into something that looked disturbingly like human footprints, as if the creature had been shifting between two different gaits. Sarah emerged from the tent, saw the destruction, and immediately started packing. "We're leaving," she said, her voice tight. "Right now." I didn't argue. We threw everything into our packs with shaking hands. It was starting to snow, light flakes drifting down through the bare branches. We were just finishing when Sarah froze, staring at something behind me. I turned slowly. At the tree line, perhaps 50 yards away, something stood watching us. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall, standing upright on legs that bent backward at the knee like a dog's hind legs. Its body was covered in matted, dark yellow fur, the color of old bone or dying grass. The torso was too long, too thin, the chest barrel-shaped and powerful. Arms hung down past where the knees would be on a human, ending in hands tipped with black claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. But it was the head that stopped my heart. The skull was elongated, wolf-like, but too flat, too wide. The muzzle was filled with teeth that were too many and too long, some curving like tusks, others straight and pointed like needles. Its eyes glowed with a sick yellow light in the early morning dimness. They were intelligent eyes, aware, watching us with an unmistakable hunger. It didn't move, just stood there regarding us, its breath steaming in the cold air. Snow accumulated on its fur, turning the dark yellow patches to muddy gold. "Don't run," I whispered to Sarah, though every instinct screamed at me to bolt. "Back away slowly. Get to the car." We started moving backward, never taking our eyes off the creature. It tracked us with its gaze but remained still. We made it perhaps 20 feet before Sarah stumbled over a tree root. She caught herself, but the sudden movement triggered something in the beast. Its lips pulled back from those nightmare teeth in what might have been a smile. Then it dropped to all fours and began walking toward us, slowly, deliberately, like a cat that knows its prey has nowhere to go. "Run. Danen. Mannen." Run. We ran. The forest became a blur of gray tree trunks and white snow. Behind us, I could hear it coming. Not running, but loping, taking its time. It could have caught us immediately, I realized. It was playing with us. Our car was parked about a quarter mile from the campsite. My lungs burned with the cold air, and my pack slammed against my back with every stride. Sarah was faster than me, pulling ahead, and I remember being grateful for that. If one of us could make it, I wanted it to be her. The creature's footfalls were getting closer. I could hear its breathing now, those deep, wet rattles. I risked a glance back and immediately wished I hadn't. It was right behind me, close enough that I could smell it. A reek of rot and wet fur and something else. Something chemical and wrong. I made a decision. I threw my pack backward, hoping it would trip the thing, or at least slow it down. Then I veered left, away from the path to the car, leading it away from Sarah. It worked. The creature followed me, crashing through the undergrowth with increasing speed. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life, my heart threatening to explode. Ahead, I could see a rocky outcropping, and I made for it, some desperate part of my brain thinking I could climb, get above it somehow. I reached the rocks and started scrambling up. My hands were numb from the cold, barely able to grip the stone. Below me, the creature arrived and reared up on its hind legs again. Standing like that, it was tall enough to reach me easily. One clawed hand shot out and closed around my ankle. The pain was instant and blinding. Those claws went through my boot and jeans like they weren't there, piercing the meat of my calf. I screamed and kicked backward with my free foot, catching it somewhere in the face. It made a sound then, not quite a howl, but something between a roar and a shriek, high-pitched and full of rage. Its grip loosened slightly, and I tore free, leaving strips of my flesh behind. I pulled myself higher up the rocks, blood pouring from my leg. The creature tried to follow, but its massive form couldn't navigate the narrow gaps between the boulders. It paced below, never taking those yellow eyes off me. making sounds that almost resembled frustrated words, harsh syllables in some language I didn't know. I don't know how long stayed up there, long enough for the snow to turn heavier, obscuring visibility, long enough for my leg to go from screaming agony to cold numbness. The creature remained below, waiting, watching. Once it threw back its head and released that terrible howl again, and I heard answers from the forest, other voices joining in a horrible chorus. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it turned and loped away into the falling snow, moving back in the direction of our campsite, towards Sarah. I climbed down as fast as I could with my injured leg, nearly falling several times. I followed the trail of blood I'd left, back through the forest. The snow was falling harder now, already covering tracks. But I knew the way. I had to reach her. I had to warn her. I found her 3 feet from our campfire, her throat open so wide I could see the white of her spine through the torn flesh. The police found me later that afternoon, hypothermic and delirious, trying to dig a grave in the frozen ground with my bare hands. They said I'd lost nearly 2 liters of blood from the wounds on my leg. They said Sarah had been killed by a bear, despite the fact that the claw marks were all wrong, despite the fact that bears don't hunt like that, don't kill like that. They said my story about a yellow-furred creature was a trauma response, my mind trying to process what I'd seen by creating a monster to blame instead of accepting the random brutality of nature. They found tracks, but the snow had degraded them. They found fur samples, but the lab said they were inconclusive, possibly wolf or large dog. They found nothing that supported my account of what happened. They charged me with negligent homicide, claiming I'd left Sarah alone to be killed while I fled. The charges were eventually dropped due to lack of evidence, but the accusation remains. In the eyes of everyone who knows the official story, I'm the coward who abandoned his girlfriend to die. I've gone back to Duluth 3 times since that October day, always heavily armed, always alone. I've walked those woods searching for evidence, for tracks, for something to prove I'm not insane. I've found nothing but my own haunting memories and a growing certainty that I'm being watched when I venture too deep into the trees. Last week, there was another killing, a hiker found near the same area where Sarah died. The official cause of death was listed as a bear attack. But I've seen the photos that leaked online before they were scrubbed from the internet. I've seen the wounds. I know the truth. It's still out there. The thing I saw that day, with its dark yellow fur and too many teeth and terrible intelligence burning in those yellow eyes. It's still hunting in those woods, killing when it chooses, and no one will believe it exists until they see it themselves. I moved away from Minneapolis 6 months ago. I couldn't stay anymore. Couldn't walk down streets where every corner reminded me of Sarah. Couldn't sleep in the apartment we'd shared. I live in Oregon now, as far from those woods as I could get while remaining in the continental United States. But I still dream about it every night. I still see those yellow eyes watching me from the shadows. I still hear that almost human howl echoing through my sleep. And I know with a certainty that makes my blood run cold that someday I'll wake up and find tracks in the snow outside my window. Tracks that are too big to be a dog and too wrong to be a wolf. Because I took something from it that day. When I kicked it in the face, when I escaped its grasp, I wounded its pride. I know it marked me, just as surely as it left those scars on my leg. And creatures like that, creatures that hunt with intelligence and purpose, they don't forget. They don't forgive. I'm writing this down now, all of it, every detail I can remember. I'm sending copies to multiple people, posting it online, making sure the story exists somewhere beyond my own deteriorating memory. Because I know how this ends. I've always known, since that moment I looked back and saw Sarah's body by the fire. The thing that killed her is still out there. It's still hunting. And eventually it will come for me. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but it will come. And when it does, I want someone to know the truth. I want someone to know that what stalks those woods outside Duluth isn't a bear, isn't a wolf, isn't any natural creature at all. I want someone to know that monsters are real. Last night I heard a howl outside my Oregon apartment, long, modulated, almost like words. The police said it was probably a coyote, and my neighbors complained about the disturbance. But I recognize that sound. I've heard it before, echoing through the forest on the worst night of my life. It found me. This morning I found tracks in the mud behind my building. Large, canine, but wrong in ways that made my hands shake when I took photos of them. The landlord said it was probably a large dog from the neighborhood, and he had someone rake the area clear before I could show anyone else. I know what's coming. I can feel it in my bones, in the aching scars on my leg that throb whenever the weather changes. The thing that took Sarah is coming to finish what it started, and this time there's no rocky outcropping to climb. No place to hide. It's patient, it's intelligent, and it's been hunting me across 1,000 miles. Tonight, I'm not going to run. I'm going to wait, with every light in my apartment blazing and a shotgun loaded with silver buckshot across my lap. I don't know if silver actually works on something like this. I don't know if anything works, but I'm going to find out. Because I'm tired of running, tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of living in fear of the inevitable. If you're reading this, it means I am already dead. It means the thing that killed Sarah has finally claimed me too. Learn from my mistake. Stay away from those woods outside Duluth. Stay away from anywhere wild and lonely where old things might still remember how to hunt. And if you ever hear a howl that sounds almost like words, if you ever see tracks that look wrong in ways you can't quite articulate, run. Run and don't stop running it until you're surrounded by light and people and civilization. Because in the dark places, in the forgotten corners where the wild still reigns, there are things that were never meant to walk under the same sun as us. And if you're unlucky enough to see one, if you're cursed enough to draw its attention, then you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. The sun is setting now. I can see darkness gathering in the corners of my apartment, shadows that seem too deep, too aware. I can smell something on the air, that reek of rot and wet fur and wrongness. My hands won't stop shaking, but I keep my grip firm on the shotgun. Outside my window, in the growing darkness, I see a shape moving, tall, bipedal, covered in dark yellow fur that seems to absorb the fading light. Yellow eyes reflecting the last rays of the sun. It's here, God help me. It's here, and I finally understand the truth. This creature, this thing that killed Sarah, it didn't just mark me that day on the rocks. It claimed me today. I've been its property since the moment I looked into those intelligent, hungry eyes. Everything since then, every mile I ran, every night I survived, was only because it allowed it. The hunt only ends when the hunter decides it ends. The shape is closer now, standing just beyond the parking lot lights, waiting for full darkness, waiting for the proper time to finish this. I'm not going to make it to morning. I know that now. But before it comes, before those claws tear through my door and those teeth find my throat, I need you to understand something important. This isn't a story about monsters in the woods. This is a warning. There are things in this world older than our understanding, crueler than our imagination. They hide in the places we've forgotten, the places we've convinced ourselves are safe because we've mapped them and named them and built our roads through them. But giving something a name doesn't make it less dangerous. Putting it on a map doesn't make it tame. The creature coming for me isn't some supernatural aberration. It's real. It's physical. It bleeds and hunts and thinks. And it's patient enough to stalk prey across state lines, intelligent enough to understand fear and use it as a weapon. I can hear it now outside my door, scratching, testing the lock, making sounds that are almost words, almost laughter. The lights are flickering, and I don't know if that's coincidence or if it somehow knows that darkness is its ally. My time is up. The hunt is over. In a moment, that door will open, and I'll see those yellow eyes one last time. I'll smell that rotten fur stench. I'll hear those wet, rattling breaths. And then there will be pain and darkness, and finally, blessed silence. Don't make my mistake. Don't go looking for monsters. Don't convince yourself that the frightening things in this world can be explained away by science and reason. Sometimes the old stories are true. Sometimes the warnings our ancestors left us were earned in blood and terror. The lock just broke.